If you've watched enough of our videos, there are times I like to get uber practical. Then there are times that I try and get really deep into the mindset of either the unfaithful or the betrayed. And then there's a country mile of all kinds of stuff in between. Today, I'd like to get extremely practical with you and talk to you about what we call the timeout protocol. I think if you've tried to communicate with your spouse, whether unfaithful or whether betrayed, or both, for about a week, you probably have understood the need to take a time out, regroup, calm yourself down, let your partner calm down, and come back together. There's a way to do it right, and there's a way to do it really, really wrong. Today, I want to talk to you about what a timeout protocol is. I want to talk about the use of it, what it looks like, and the abuse of it. Because if we don't understand those facets of the timeout protocol, I think that we can miss the ability to utilize it and run the risk of damaging our spouse or partner even more. I can tell you 15 years later, Samantha and I, if we get heated, we know how to take a time out. We will take a time out. For those of you that may be new to the video blog, I'm not talking about infidelity related discussions. I'm talking about everyday parenting, bills, normal stuff that we deal with. Samuel's certainly not perfect. Samantha's far closer to perfection than I am, but still is not perfect. And so we have learned how to take a time out the right way, and I hope you will too by watching this video. You may be new to some of the verbiage we use, but flooding is a term that describes what happens in either the unfaithful or the betrayed when your heart rate rushes to over 100 beats per minute. Studies will show you that you really can't process or even hear what your partner is saying when you are over 100 beats per minute because you have arrived in a fight or flight stage. It's very common when a couple are trying to resolve their issues or make the other person understand what they are trying to say, that you ultimately will come to a point where you are flooding emotionally and you can't hear what they're saying, they can't hear what you're saying. It's becoming more and more toxic. There's every cuss word, there's all kinds of innuendos, there's all kinds of verbal assault that is going on. And if you don't intervene, there is a possibility, and this does happen, that some people get into physical abuse. And obviously, we would never condone that. And we want to do everything we can to prevent that. And many of you may say, well, Samuel, we're nowhere near that. Okay, but I think in many ways we can be very damaging to our partner if we don't understand the need to take a timeout. The use of a timeout protocol is vital because what it does is it protects your spouse from any further damage. If you're an unfaithful, you've already damaged them enough. Do you really want to keep damaging them emotionally or mentally by continuing to try and make them get it or make them do this or pound them with more and more assault, if you will, verbally? If you're a betrayed, do you really want to harm them with your words? Do you really want to shame them or torture them or harass them? Do you want your conversation to even be heard? See, our conversation has to be redemptive. The use of a timeout protocol is to still disagree with your spouse, but honor them. It's a way to say, look, I don't want to harm you any further, and for us unfaithful, that's key. The last thing that we want to do is do more damage. But when we get into this fight or flight and we're raging and we're angry, we have to have some type of a ripcord to pull or else we're going to do more damage. You see, I know that we don't want to, at the core of who we are, we don't want to harm our spouse anymore. Now, for a betrayed, there comes times maybe where you want to become punitive or you lash out. It's just normal. It happens. But a timeout protocol can prevent that. And it's something that has to be used or else you find yourself marathoning, which is talking 1, 2, or 3 hours, going into the wee hours of the night, spiraling out of control, causing more and more damage. For Samantha, she needed to be able to withdraw and self-soothe. And for many people, man or woman, unfaithful or betrayed, there are times when you have to pull back, withdraw, and self-soothe. How you use it is key. For Samantha, what she would do when she felt threatened, when she felt like she was flooding, when she felt like maybe I was out of control, or when she felt like she was out of control, she would basically go, I can't talk anymore, I need a timeout. Now, she was not expected to do this. I can't talk anymore. I am experiencing flooding. I am having a heart rate over 100 beats per minute. I am really upset, and if you make me keep talking, I'm going to probably cause you more hurt and damage and collateral damage, and I really don't want to do that because I love you, and I care for you, and I care about restoration, but at this point, I can't really think straight, so I'm going to put together all these sentences to help you feel safe. That's absurd. And oftentimes we think that our spouse should be able to take a time out that way, and that's unrealistic. The most that Samantha could do would basically say, I can't talk anymore, I'm taking a time out. What that meant to me was if I kept going, if I kept pushing, if I kept trying to be right, if I kept trying to make her get my point, if I kept trying to prove how I was wrong, I was going to hurt her more, which was the last thing I wanted to do. Now, for me, what it looked like, because yes, the unfaithful has every right to have the ability to call a timeout as well. And they have to, out of dignity, they have to have that right as well. But I will talk about how they abuse it in a few minutes. For me, I simply said, I'm calling a timeout, and I would literally put my hands up like this and say, I'm taking a timeout. And I would simply walk away. I would go outside, I would take a walk, I would sometimes get in the truck and go for a drive. I sometimes would just go outside and sit on a swing that we had. But I had to withdraw and self-soothe as well. Now, I know that some people say, oh, if you can walk away in a fight, then you can walk away from the marriage. And, oh, that's terrible. Samuel, oh, listen, I'm sorry. We're not dealing with everyday, general kind of marital fights. We're dealing with chemical warfare of emotional flooding, chaos, absolute drama. And some of you may not have experienced that. Yay for you. But for a lot of us who have those moments, there has to be a way to take a time out. And yes, I would say I'm taking a time out, and I would walk away because I, in that moment, wanted to honor Samantha and not hurt her further, say something I was going to have to regret, or say something I knew I was going to have to apologize for in the next day, week, or month, or when I met with my therapist. So I would advise you to use that time out to prevent hurting each other even more. Now, the abuse of it is vital. Before you hit send, I have tons of people who have said to me, and it's mostly the betrayed talking about the unfaithful who will do this, right? The conversation gets just a little bit heated, and there's just a little bit of discussion about their affairs or what they've done or what have you, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to take a time out. This is too much. We're taking a time out. And it's not necessarily honoring you, it's stonewalling you as an unfaithful. The problem is not the timeout protocol. The timeout is their heart, because in that moment they are being selfish, and at some level they're being controlling, and at some level they're really just focusing on their own pain, not you, the betrayed. So before you maybe attack the timeout protocol, I think it's better said that they are dealing with shame, and so their shame is being triggered and they are unwilling to have some maybe difficult conversations. How do you break that? Well, you have to do everything that you can to make the process safe. And at some level, if they, the unfaithful, are going to do this over dramatic, oh, it's time to take a time out, when there's just a little bit of uncomfortability, you're probably going to have to get to an expert third party draw some lines in the sand, and recalibrate how you're going to be able to communicate, because you, the betrayed, are going to constantly feel suffocated and stonewalled, and you're never going to be able to communicate what you need to communicate because they won't let you, and that's incredibly alarming, problematic, and is not going to create safety, and you're going to remain stuck. That's just the bottom line. So, unfaithful, if that's what you're going to use the timeout protocol for, you're going to actually wound your spouse even more. You're controlling them. Is that what you want to do? You're harming them further, and you're pushing them away. I don't think that's what you want to do. You're going to have to be able to stand in the gap, if you will, and take some of the heat while keeping the conversation safe. And a safe conversation is not full of attacking, shaming, torturing, harassing, but is also not perfect. They're not going to be able to, in their hurt and their pain, say, you know, honey, I felt really betrayed and violated by your affairs. And so I need you to understand, in a very calm, very perfectly orchestrated, grammatically correct sentence, that I'm really devastated. Can you receive that? That is ridiculous, but that's what we unfaithful sometimes expect, and it's just not possible. Now, before you unfaithful kind of tar and feather me, betrayed, if you, when your spouse or partner calls a timeout protocol, decide to follow them, like I have done early on to Samantha, and follow them and say, see, you never let me talk. You won't let me get my thoughts out. See, you're just a controller. You are not respecting the timeout protocol, which is the very reason that the timeout protocol, it needs to be implemented, and you're going to wound your spouse more. You're going to cause more damage and push them further away, and then wonder why they don't want to talk with you, why they don't want to meet with you. You've got to respect the timeout protocol. You've got to be able to implement at times this protocol to honor each other and make the process safe. Finally, you may say, Samuel, well, we want the timeout protocol. How do we find it? Well, I'm unable to respond to a lot of the email that I get because most of them are very lengthy, and I can't get to them all. So go to affairrecovery.com, and you can email in to support@hope-now.com and request the timeout protocol, and they will get it to you as quick as they're able. It's pretty easy. It'll be an email form. I promise you, if you can implement this, it will help you both immensely.